In 1961, the Soviet Union ignited a rocket that reached the edge of the atmosphere, signaling a milestone the world watched with deep apprehension. Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space, serving as the visible, smiling proof of a sophisticated scientific machine. This achievement projected an image of a flawless, high-tech superpower to the West, an empire with a trajectory that seemed impossible to intercept. However, the machinery required to sustain this orbital power operated under internal pressures that were far less visible to the outside world. The origins of this system date back to a period of total economic and social collapse, where the very blueprint for the Soviet state was first drawn. In 1917, the Russian Empire was effectively a ruin. 3 years of World War I left millions dead, and the economy in total paralysis. The monarchy collapsed under the weight of a populace that was no longer willing to starve for a falling war effort. Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks successfully leveraged this desperation, promising peace, land, and bread to a nation with almost nothing left. Actually securing that power required a brutal civil war and the systematic use of force to eliminate political opposition. By 1922, these fragmented territories unified into the Soviet Union, the first large-scale attempt at a communist state in human history. This new state was born into a permanent emergency, embedding a culture of violence and absolute central control into its political structure. After Lenin's death, power consolidated around Joseph Stalin, who moved to transform the nation through total centralized authority. Stalin initiated a rapid, forced industrialization, shifting the USSR from a rural agrarian society into a heavy industrial power in a single decade. The output of factories, railways, and steel mills spiked vertically as the state prioritized production volume. Simultaneously, forced agricultural collectivization and widespread political purges resulted in the deaths of millions of citizens as the industrial line rose. State repression became a primary economic tool, with millions of people subjected to systemic terror and forced labor to meet the government's quotas. Stalin treated the lives and labor of the working class as a secondary resource, to be consumed in the pursuit of his industrial and military ambitions. Following World War II, the Soviet Union emerged as a global superpower, standing as the primary military and nuclear rival to the United States. This military posture required a massive permanent draft, placing the burden of empire on generations of young men. Billions of rubles flowed into the space race and international espionage, even as the basic domestic needs of the population were consistently sidelined. While Soviet rockets reached orbit, internal distribution systems failed to provide enough bread to feed the people waiting in these lines. The government was prioritizing the appearance of global dominance over the fundamental survival of its own society. By the late 1980s, a system built on coercion and a drain on human capital reached its logical limit. The economy could no longer support the weight of its own military ambitions. This internal failure became impossible to hide. Citizens began to openly reject the state's authority, demanding an end to a system that had failed to deliver on its original promises. Then, in 1991, the entire Soviet Union completely collapsed, ending its long run as a global superpower with surprising speed. The empire fractured into 15 separate independent nations, leaving behind a map of Eurasia that looked entirely different than it had just months prior. The Soviet experiment demonstrated that scientific and military feats cannot sustain a state if its very foundation is built on the systemic suffering and neglect of its people.